Hey everyone. As we mentioned in our finale last season, each co-host was given an episode this season to talk about whatever they would like to talk about and cover before the podcast ends. Today's episode is Ashley's, joined by Elizabeth Black and Meg Baatz. Today's episode, though, is one of the very few episodes we actually recorded almost a year ago before we realized it was going to take some time to get this final season out the door and on the podcast. So just keep that in mind as you listen. Before we jump in, though, multiple listeners have sent in beautiful messages and writings for this final season, reflecting on how the podcast has impacted them, as well as describing their own life on Side B. If you would like to record a message yourself for this season, there is still time, so go ahead and do it now. Go to lifeonsideb.com/final season and you can record it there. Remember, only share details about yourself that you feel comfortable being published on this podcast. The audience message today comes from our dear listener, Angel.
Hey, this is Angel from the NYC Side B community. Feeling a little sad about the announcement of being the final season, mostly because I just feel so late in the game, but I am so happy that I was able to jump in. In the past year or so, and I have just found so much enjoyment in listening to the podcasts. Definitely has given me a sense of community that I haven't felt in a long time, and knowing there are people walking through this space like me who have really wrestled with these questions and more so thought about so many different things I've never even thought about, and so that's just what makes it so exciting. I'll say two things that really meant a lot to me for the podcast. The first is I love the fact that this is a podcast with a group of people that are not on some like same organization. They just have a very common community, which I think it's beautiful because it reflects the community that I so love seeing in the church. And indeed, you guys are also pretty ecumenically diverse as well, which I love as well, And that just makes me happy because it always makes me think about that the church isn't supposed to be like one, uniform idea. It's this diverse, beautiful thing that makes what the Apostle Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians is just the beauty of the different facets of the body and how it comes together to make something so meaningful for the world. So that's something that I love about it. Similarly, I love that you guys are not like folk theologians, or people that are just like, oh, it would be a nice sounding theological thought. No, you guys know your stuff, and I think that's beautiful. It's like you guys are sharp. You have actually pursued education on this, and you have church experience more than anything else, as well as life experience. And that really, to me, makes you qualified to really speak huge volumes in this space. Thank you guys. I think this is wonderful. I hope this is not the last because, this reaches a broader community beyond the States. There are people that listen in different countries. I don't know if you realize this. I'm sure you do. And it really brings it just outreaches to the broader Christian community that also consider themselves Side B. So thank you, and thank you for all being beautiful people.
Hello, dear queer family and friends. Welcome to our latest episode of Life on Side B in our final season. And I'm joined with my co-host, Ashley. Ashley, you want to say hey?
Hello, everybody.
And we have a special guest with us, a Life on Side B veteran, and probably, I believe, like the first guest.
Yep.
The first guest on the podcast ever. A dear friend of mine and Ashley's, and also I have the great privilege of working with her every single day, the great Meg Baatz. Hey, Meg.
Hey, everybody. It's great to be back here, and I'm very sad the series is ending, but it's an honor to be a part of this series finale.
Yeah, it's so great to have you. It's like a book, you helped open the book and now you're helping to close the book.
It's very poetic. I love it.
Meg has been involved in many ways. Like, I feel like as a part, she was the introduction for you and everything. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I thought about like, do we do like a big formal introduction? But I feel like probably a lot of our listeners already know Meg Baatz in many ways. But if you don't, because I feel like why not? We have to. Meg Baatz is a like long-standing. I don't want to say veteran because you're not that old, but just member of the Side B community. She has helped, I think, bring a lot of people into the community, help people process through a lot of the first steps of, coming to terms and loving our sexuality. Meg was actually one of the first people I called and came out to years ago, which was like so cool. And now I get the honor, as I said, of working with Meg basically like every day, as Meg is the co-founder and CEO of Kaleidoscope. And yeah, she just kills it and is doing amazingly great things, not just for Side B folks, but for also queer Christians from all over the theological spectrum. And then also just really working to reach out into the broader queer community in our ministry and training pastors and lay leaders to love their queer neighbors well. So, Meg, I think that covered a lot, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to
that's
share
awesome.
about you and your journey.
As you were sharing that, I still remember that phone call where you shared your story with me. I was like in a park in Denver, like on my bike, and I like took a break and sat down, and I was like near a lake or something. It was also really like poetic, I guess. But even though I know for you, it was like you were really going through it. But yeah, I never could have guessed what God would have had in store. And it's such an honor to be working alongside you. And yeah, I think just I want to share about my philosophy at Kaleidoscope is just really kind of asking what, for the person before me, what is their next step in growth? And I think all of us have that regardless of our background or beliefs. And so, yeah, that's really my heart. And I think a lot of that has been very much shaped by you, Elizabeth, and just the approach that you have to spiritual care for people.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Meg. Sorry, my dog was barking in the back. Forgive me, you guys. And you do
No
it so
worries.
well, Meg. And it's funny, just not to harp on that story, but you make it sound so poetic and beautiful. I remember being like snot-nosed and crying hysterically on the side of the road near Washington Square Park. So it was this. But I also remember you were on a bike trip and you had just done a like COVID test and were waiting for your results or something like that, or gotten over COVID or something. I don't remember. COVID was related.
Yeah,
Do
it
you
was
remember
probably
this?
something
I
like
mean,
that.
did come
Yeah.
out 2020, didn't you?
Delay. Yeah, it was 2020. So it was
COVID.
when everybody was having like reckonings in their lives in one form or fashion.
It's true.
Everyone
yeah.
was forced to be alone with their thoughts for a minute.
I remember,
Terrifying.
Elizabeth, it was 2020 because you and your roommate were like rooting for me in my like Revoice talk for that year for Revoice Online. Yeah, that was quite a year.
All the things. Well, yeah, we're happy to have you here chatting with us. And Ashley, this is actually like Ashley's topic. This is your chosen episode. So thanks for asking me, Ashley, to be a part of the convo too. But I'd love for you to kind of share what your vision was, because I think you've been talking about this for a while now, wanting to like broach this subject. So yeah, let's hear it.
Like I said, the official, I think, title of this one was like Healthy Boundaries. I think one of the reasons, it's like one, like you said, Meg has always been able to be such a wise person. She's one of the few people, like someone asks a question or vents in our Facebook group and Meg's ready with like a paragraph, like
Yes,
of just
always.
inspiration and prayers and scripture verses. And I'm like, she's ready to go.
Honestly,
So it's like-
that should be like a saying for Meg. Meg is ready with a paragraph. Like, that is perfect.
Like, anything always has like this great in-depth answer, and I'm just usually like, it'll be all right.
I'm not always prepared with like if I'm packing for a trip. I often feel unprepared, or I like show up late or to the wrong location. Like, it's one of my
Really?
weaknesses. But with words, I will always be prepared with words.
Hey, you can't have everything. And then like I feel like every time I've had like a personal episode or whatever, Elizabeth has really been able to get a lot out of me somehow. So I was like, let's go with it.
I think that's also something that should be my personal saying that doesn't sound as nice as Meg's is Elizabeth's able to always get a lot out of me. And I don't know why. Because I wish, Ashley, that was the only time I've heard that, but I tend to hear that
Really?
a lot.
People
Yeah.
trust
apparently.
you. Yeah. Like, people who
Not a bad
don't
thing.
open up will like talk to Elizabeth, and they'll end up believing and being like, oh my gosh, I just said all these things to her that I've never told anybody before.
It's really true.
It's a gift.
It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just sometimes I feel bad for people because I don't think that they expected, like, they just thought they were getting coffee with me and they left, like, just
I didn't know
telling
we
me
were
the
doing
deepest
this.
parts of their soul.
So one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is because I know that for, at the very least, in the past, like I don't really know what the current like church and ministry vibe is, where when women come out to spiritual leaders or mentors, what advice they're getting now. I just know the advice that I got in the moment, which was like, I don't know, 10 years or so ago, which so
Wow.
I didn't realize it was that long.
wow.
Dang. Yeah, I'm turning 34 next month.
Hey.
Like you said, Meg's not that old. I'm like, anybody who's in our group that's like in their 30s at this point is a
We do feel like the elders. Like, I feel like
Really?
this movement is growing so quickly.
yeah.
Like, I'm like, man, I feel so old. Like, there's a whole new
I
generation
feel lost
coming
after
up under
talking.
me. Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
I don't know what you're talking about.
absolutely. So Ray Lowe and I went to Urbana last year. It was like
Mhm.
around this time last year or something like that. And we were doing a Q&A.
It was
with
usually in
Greg.
December, yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay. So we were doing a Q&A with Greg Coles and Sam. What's Sam's last name? Australia.
When?
Thanks, Zach.
Well,
Yeah,
Sam
so
Wan.
yeah.
Yeah, the four of us, and I think some other folks from InterVarsity as well were there. And anyways, people were asking just general questions, and then all of a sudden, someone raised their hand and they're like, I would like to ask the elders in the room a few questions, and they were absolutely talking about me.
Because there was no
And I
one
think
older than
Sam-
you.
And I'm pretty sure, yeah, Greg was in there too, and we were just like, okay, well, I guess we gotta accept that. We're elders.
I was
So,
thinking
yes,
about that a
that's really
lot. Like, in the broader LGBTQ world, I think there's a lot of people who are like, oh my gosh, there's so many more queer people than when I was younger. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But among the many reasons, I think is just thinking about in the queer world, like the history of the AIDS crisis and just how many people like have not survived and things like that. And I'm like, what's the translation? Like, is there any reason why like people are kind of put as elders, specifically in like side B Christian queer spaces? And I feel like maybe there's ways that we've been affected by that, but I think there's also like I think there's other aspects of just the history of the church, and understanding that history is really important. Like for me, I came out within a year of Exodus International shutting down.
Mhm.
And so I
Yeah.
feel like people in the church pre-Exodus close, like coming out during that period, looked so different. And Exodus shutting down, that didn't mean that everything changed everywhere. But I feel like just a lot of the climate of the church has changed, a lot of the climate of just where we're at socially and politically in this conversation is so different. And yeah, I feel like there's so many rapid changes. There's so many reasons that people aren't necessarily visible or have had a hard time really being in a place of health, because there are so many things stacked up against us that it is hard to find elders. And I was talking to someone about this past week, like, what is our response to that? I think a lot of that is we have to remember that being healthy is not just something that we do for ourselves or in our relationship with God. It's actually us being able to become wise and help support people who are younger than us as well.
Yeah, that's really good. And I mean, we haven't even like broached the topic officially yet, but I think that has everything to do with actually kind of where you were going with things in terms of like recognizing your own experience in history and place within the movement and what you've learned about relationships and boundaries in the process.
Because I think also, like, there's still obviously a lot of younger people are coming out now, but there's still a lot of people, I think, who are like our age who did come out within the past 10 years, and they're still trying to find their place in things. And I've had similar experiences to that, because I started kind of really reconciling all of this also probably around the year Exodus closed and everything. And the guy who would talk about sexuality and everything at our base was a guy who had went through Exodus in like Ecuador or something. And I remember I was taking like, they let me like sit in his classes that he was giving in like our counseling ministry or whatever, and he was giving everything. And I think I had recently looked up and it was the year it closed, and I was like, you do know that that organization like shut down, right? Not because I had any skin at the game at the time, but it was just kind of like, at that time for me it was very frustrating and heartbreaking, because I felt like queer Christians with a traditional ethic, that made me feel like we had been given up on, because I thought that that was the only way we could approach it, was with that lens. And he didn't know, and he found out later. But those were the lessons that I was taught. All the things that a lot of people learned through Exodus, either having been in it or the things that had infiltrated into the church. A lot of the only resources they had in Spanish, which is where I was at the time when I was first reconciling and coming out, was in a Hispanic country, and they didn't have a lot of resources. So what people had were those resources. And I feel like it was very concentrated on men a lot of the time. This is what men do for this. It was like take a walk, eat a sandwich. It was weird. Seriously,
the
it was
old
like
take a walk, eat a sandwich.
I'm not even kidding. It was like 5 things, but it was like, are you tired, bored, hungry, or lonely?
Oh, the HALT principle.
Yeah, like
Yes, hungry,
so
angry, lonely, tired.
Okay, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Okay, see?
Because when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, that's when you're gay. Every other time, straight as a line.
Well, that was the thing. Gay people didn't
time,
exist. It
was
straight people having, I don't know, odd urges, whatever. But for women, it was not exactly that, because I was thinking, I'm like, that's not helpful. But it was like they talked a lot about codependency, and I remember the first time I had heard the terms codependency was in like a class on addiction, and like a person who is like usually the partner or the enabler of a person with an addiction. And that was the first time I had heard that terminology of what codependency was and everything. And then I come into this other setting, and that's how they're using codependency. And I'm like, so being attracted to women is an addiction to people, or an addiction to connection, or like that's the way it was framed. And once you revealed that you were a woman attracted to women, usually just really the first and maybe only thing they knew to do was just be really hawk-eyed with all your relationships and your friendships, and ask me if I was hanging out enough with my husband, and And if there would be someone who they saw me spending more time with or something, I would be either subtly or not so subtly told, like, back off.
Yes.
Like, cool it. And I'm like, there'd be times where, like, I remember, like, there were different situations where I'm like, I'm not doing anything. So I don't know what's wrong with y'all. Other times where I'm like, it was that I was attracted to this person, but I was still not in a place where I could really deal with those things. Like, like that situation was made me realize, like, I'm not ex-gay. This is not in the past. This is present. And everybody was like, just basically the answer for everything was like, just stay away from him. And I'm like, that doesn't do anything. And so it was always like, that was the only method against temptation that I was given, was just like, walk it off, like, just stay away from him. And I'm like, more than once. I mean, I don't know if you guys had
try to eat a sandwich? Did you try that one?
I said, one, we was broke. I didn't have snacks. I didn't have nothing.
There you go.
We was
There
poor
it is.
missionaries. So I guess that was the problem. And then I remember, like, as a teenager, I had these talks with kids in youth groups, being like, telling the girls, like, you and this guy, y'all need to, like, y'all need to cool it. Y'all need to, guard your heart, all those things. I never got any of those. Ever. No one ever talked to me about a boy, besides my mom. More than once, I was told to stay away from certain girls. Like, looking back, and I was like, you'd say it tracks, but really doesn't make any sense. But, like, and I remember in YWAM, there was a certain conversation, like, one of my leaders approached me, like, we need to talk about something. I'm like, okay. They started the whole conversation with, we're not saying you're a lesbian. And I was like,
oh my God.
Like, pulled me off aside, random, kind of really out of left field. I was like, if that's not what you're saying, why did the conversation start like that?
Exactly. What is about to be said?
The word
Right.
but.
Yeah, no, it was a friend of mine who apparently, it was a very odd situation, I'll say that much. But she was the one who wanted me to stay away, but she asked the leaders to tell me that. And I'm like, can I have a conversation with her? Because I would like to know what's going on. And she listed some things that were making her comfortable that I didn't do, which was also weird. But I felt she was being triggered from things in her past that made her just feel a certain type of way. But there are things that she said happened that never happened, and things that made her feel uncomfortable that she initiated. So I was like, I'm confused, but later. I was like, I'm just going to stay far away from whatever this situation is, because that was not fun at all. And then I talked to those leaders later. They're like, no, she was crazy. We weren't accused. We wanted you to understand that we weren't accusing you of anything. I was like,
What?
that was not the way to do it, though.
Yeah. No, not at all. Not at all.
Could have done it better.
Yeah, and
But,
I'm just thinking about what you're saying too, and like from a bisexual perspective, I always feel like this topic is extra difficult because
Right.
I did have all those conversations when I was in youth group about, like, guard your heart, stay away from guys, they're all predators, they're out to get you. And in some respects, they weren't wrong. Like, there were a lot of predatory men out there, unfortunately. But I think it also instilled this very negative view on men that all men think about constantly is sex.
Right.
And, like, I've talked to my husband about this a lot, and he's like, I don't do that. I never did do that. Like, even as a teenager, like, that wasn't me. Like, I don't know. Did you guys ever hear the, like, men think about sex every, like, 10 seconds or something dumb like that? And he was like, I don't even know. How do you... Sorry. Like, how do you live your life? It's okay. Like, how do you live your life? Like, you still have to, like, go to work and do the dishes, like, whatever. So, I had those conversations about guys, but never about women, obviously, because you aren't attracted to girls. And then recognizing and finally coming out and being like, okay, well, then what does this mean for me? If those boundaries that were described or, spelled out for men. Like, I went to Bible college where you couldn't be in a standing car with someone of the opposite sex. So I used to
Right.
literally like roll out of the door while the car was about to park so that nobody could say that I wasn't in the room or sorry, in the car. So like, okay, so if that's the standard, if that's the boundaries, then I have to apply that to women too. Forget it. Like, I'm never going to have any friends. I'm not going to have any meaningful relationships. But at the same time, I do think boundaries are important. Like, I don't think you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, we do have to recognize that sometimes, like, stepping out of a relationship or giving people time or something is going to help sustain a relationship or help you realize that a relationship isn't healthy. And I'll stop. But yeah, those are just Ashley just processing, like, what have we been taught before about boundaries and where does it actually work in our lives?
That's really good. I'm thinking about what you both said and just kind of this, like, basically, like, Exodus saying, like, hey, there's, like, LGBT people, what do we do? And they sort of took this, like, the same approach as addictions. Like, oh, homosexuality equals an addiction. So we're going to have these support groups and we're going to try to help people, like, sober up, so to speak, from the same sex in general. And yeah, it's like, obviously there are a lot of problems with that approach. And I think in the church post Exodus, it's like, okay, well, what does good care of LGBTQ people look like? And there's been so many different people trying to figure out answers. And yeah, I think something I've heard with codependency too, because codependency is originally like a psychological term around addictions, and I've heard it used a lot around Exodus circles, around like I guess that similar era, that set of decades in the church where it's like, oh, you're codependent, like it's not even in the case that like you're dating someone who has a substance abuse addiction or something like that, but like, oh, this is a love addiction and we're going to apply this term over it. And I think to use the term codependency or like idolatry, like you're idolizing somebody, I think all of us are prone to have not good boundaries with other people, regardless of our sexuality. I think we can also idolize literally anything, but that's not like a gay thing per se. And I don't think it really I don't think it really addresses like just some of the opportunities in our relationships. And I'm trying to figure out how to describe that. But I can't think of any examples right now, but I do think of the idea of like, what does good care look like? And I think one of many problems from the Exodus era of the church was like this sickness approach. Like, you are sick and let's obsess over how this is a like sickness or disease to get rid of, rather than, hey, you're a human, and humans, like, as we grow in being loved in God, like, we can be healthy people. And what does it look like to be a healthy person as you are, rather than like pretend that you're a different person or things like that. Even in the addictions world, I've heard things like the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. And so even if that is your approach, but even if not, like, I think what we're looking at here is, how do we have healthy connection? And obviously that's where the boundaries conversation comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think like there was the message of, you are sick, but also you are dangerous. Like,
yes,
at least that's how I internalized it. even before coming out. Like, I remember thinking the queer friends that I did know in high school were dangerous. Like, they were going to flirt with me. They were going to try to make out with me. Like, how am I going to I remember when one of my good friends came out in high school and I was like, well, how are we going to have sleepover parties anymore? Like, you're dangerous, basically. And I remember how deeply, I didn't say that last part, but it was implied. And she was so deeply hurt by me. And like, in retrospect, I totally understand, because it's like, no one trusts us. So then I internalize that as like, I cannot even trust myself. And that's not a way to live. Like, again, our boundaries essential to healthy existence, absolutely. But I don't think it should be motivated because we're afraid of ourselves and what we're capable of or something.
Yeah, like we can't have healthy relationships when we are afraid of ourselves. I think we have good relationships when we are rooting for our ability to be trustworthy, and when we don't shirk off the responsibility to be trustworthy. I think when people have told me, or when I've internalized that I'm not trustworthy, that's exactly the bar that I live up to.
Yes.
And when I'm told I'm trustworthy, like I even think of in the scriptures when Paul is writing to the Corinthians and he's like, I'm confident that God's going to finish the work that he started in you. And it's like, wow, that I don't take that lightly. And so, yeah, that dangerous label is very dangerous.
Right, because supposedly, like, at the very least, the way it was framed in the kind of like the ex-gay thing was that same-sex attraction was, in an extent, a rejection of your gender identity. So you were playing the role or trying to be more masculine, so your attraction to women, therefore, was going to be kind of like a man's attraction to women. And I think that's how we all faced it, just with that fear of being that predatory thing, which is not the case, even though obviously women can, objectify other women as well. I'm not saying that we can't, but it's not the same, because it's just not. So I think my thing was, I was just taught, just stay away. And then you get into each friendship you get into, and there could be feelings, or there could not even be feelings. And you notice this codependent pattern in your life, and you're like, well, am I going to end up being attracted to them? And you run away anyway. So it's like, you never really learn to work through that patch in a friendship that you will meet in different scenarios in life, and you just run away from it every time, and you don't learn what a healthy boundary is going to look like when everything is just always on guard, always run away. There are obviously moments where you need to be like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm a dip, because there's no saving this. I got to go. But there are other moments where I think we really can be like, if I can set my boundaries well, this could be fruitful, this could be good. And we have to learn how to do that. We can't always be afraid of ourselves.
I'm curious, how do you discern that? And Meg, jump in too. But like,
Sure.
How do you know? Because that's really hard. Like, how do you know this is either a relationship worth kind of fighting for or moving through, or like, it's not even that it's not worth it. Like, everybody's worth it. But this, like you said, Ashley, this is going nowhere productive. And like, there's no amount of help or accountability or whatever that's going to really help this relationship function the way that I want it to. So I need to pick another path. Like, how do you discern that? How have you in relationships in your own life?
Great question.
I don't know. Like I said, I don't really have, like, right now at this time in my life, I was in like a small group not long ago, and they're like, how many of you have people that you can like go to kind of like on a whim when you need to like process something, or like, who is it that you go to? I'm like, I ain't really got a lot of people right now. I got me and my little family. We kind of it. And they're like, oh, that's so sad. But I mean, it's true. Kind of because I've been afraid of that. When I was younger, my best friend, and I'm still friends with this person to this day, we were teenagers. We were very codependent, but I mean, what 16-year-olds are going to get friendship right? That's a high expectation. I was like, looking back on it, I was like, it had some unhealthy moments, yeah, but it had a lot of good points, and that person is someone who really marked a before and after in my life. And then there was, like I said, this other friendship that I had that made me realize I'm definitely still gay. Both of those friendships had very similar feelings that they produced in me. My best friend from high school, thank God, she's not my type. That would have been a problem. But that never happened. I never had those feelings for her. But it was always curious to me that those are some of the strongest feelings I've ever had for someone, period. That was the first time I loved someone outside of my family. And for a young queer person, that's confusing. It's like, it's not that I'm in love with you, but this beautiful, popular person is the first person I've had strong feelings for outside of family. What do I do with that? And she was like a lifeline for me. I feel like it was someone that God put in my life to help me really stand on my own 2 feet, because I was going through a lot of like depression and family issues, and she was a rock for me. But I leaned on her too much, and I know that. And I know that I even hurt her in some ways. Later on down the line, like I said, this other friendship where this person I definitely was attracted to.
Hey, Ashley, could I interrupt you? Because I'm really curious about something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's fine. What were some examples where you're like, yeah, this was a little too much in terms of like dependency? Because I think for some people, this probably feels really obscure.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, sure.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. Go ahead.
I have a question too that I think could be really important, which is like, how are you defining codependency?
Right.
Like,
okay.
How would you define that? So, yeah, I'd like to hear that, like, along with Elizabeth's question.
I could probably give more
we
examples.
Work well
my
together.
Definition,
you see this?
Yeah. My definition is probably obscure. I think needing someone is not necessarily codependency. I've learned that now. Needing someone is not codependency. But I think when you get to a point of like, I don't know what to do without this person, it is a level of codependency to me. I could be wrong. I don't know. That's kind of like what I've guided myself by. And I think when I was younger, it was a lot of just also anxiety, rejection that I carried with me because of family issues and everything. So there'd be things that if like she didn't answer the phone, it would, or like if she ignored my calls like intentionally. I mean, like, you don't answer the phone, that's fine. Like she was like, I don't want to talk to you right now. I would get mad. Like I would get mad. Or I'd get butthurt about it. And it'd be like, you would rather watch TV than talk to me? And she's like, yes, I had a hard week. I want to chill out. And I couldn't in the moment like grasp it. Like later on looking at it, I was like, I was so stupid. Or like, because she's the person who taught me to be affectionate, because in my family we weren't and I wasn't. And one time she like made a remark about how I didn't say I love you back the way she wanted me to or something. And we got in a fight. And I remember when we were graduating high school, she was like, I would like to, like, she was taking some space from everybody. Like, she was taking space from her boyfriend, from, like, she was trying to really find herself after she graduated, because she graduated, like, a year before I did. Really find herself and spend some time with God. Like, she was taking, like, this, like, year, like, really wanting to just go deeper with God and try to find herself. And she was kind of just taking space from everything and everyone. And that included me. And that made me mad. Like, well, I can understand you want to take space from this and that and the other thing, but why do you need to take space from me? And the more she pulled away, the more suffocating I became. And I got really hurt about it, where later on it was like, yeah, maybe she could have handled it better, but I definitely could have handled that better. You know, and we talked about it later on down the line. She said, it's just, you were so trapped in your house and I was the only lifeline you had. And that was a lot for me at, 16, 17, 18 years old, to be the only person you have to lean on. Because we talk about that a lot, like in Side B spaces, like how we want a best friend and we want like, we want someone to lean on and everything. And we always talk about how like, yeah, that's perfectly fine, but we need a community, because one person, like even say this to married couples, one person is not going to solve all your problems, and one person can't be the only support you have. And being that I was putting all of that weight on her, it got to a point where it was too much, because my family's a lot and I was going through a lot. And I could see now that I put too much on her, and I felt very guilty about that for a long time. It took a long time for me to really forgive myself for that I'm like, I'm the one who put the wedge between us. Like that's mostly on me. Not all on me, but it's mostly on me, And she even recognized, she's like, I like being needed. And she's like, I let it get that far, And that's something she's had to learn with family and has been going through therapy for now, like putting boundaries in her family with like, her immediate family and her in-laws and stuff like that. Like it's something that she's had to learn in her life. And I think from that, I kind of overcorrected to the other side. I never wanted to need anybody like that again. So I became the person who kind of wanted to rescue everybody, gave myself a hero complex. Especially going into missions and everything, I would like go overboard pouring into people that I was mentoring and thinking like, I'm the only one who knows you this well, this, that, and the other thing. That's totally like a bad complex. At 22, thinking you know everything and you can fix everyone if they just listen. And it would get muddled when you are in a place that doesn't recognize attraction, where you can't say that there may be a level of attraction there, so it's something else. And to me, that wasn't helpful. If I keep calling it something else, I'm avoiding the problem. If I can be like, no, I definitely am attracted to this person, I can move accordingly. But if that doesn't exist, it doesn't help. And so with this other person, I said at that point I was like 20, 23. She was a person who was very needy, very toxic, caused a lot of problems where I lived. I was pretty infatuated. But I was like, no. It took a while for me to recognize what it was. I didn't immediately. But I was like, I can help this person. I'm gonna be this person's friend. Sometimes how we try to do is like, I'm gonna redirect this attraction and I'm gonna try to turn it into something else. I'm gonna be a blessing in her life. But that was one of those situations like, I need a dip because I'm not healthy enough to do what I think I'm gonna do. And like I said, she was a person she was very manipulative. I was not the only person that ended up like looking back after she left as like, that was bad. But looking back over the years, kind of looking back to like those two relationships where there's like, sometimes nothing is either completely good or bad. Something is kind of like mostly bad with some good in it. And some things are mostly good with a little bad in it. I could see my relationship with my friend in high school. That relationship pushed me more towards God, because she did. That was something she always did. She was she was always has been a person who's consistently looking for God in every situation and trying to find the lesson in things and pushing me towards God when like I didn't know where to go. She's the one who taught me that. Whereas this other person only pulled me towards herself. She wanted me to feel that need that she had for me to, to be that support for her and everything. Like she didn't like want me to push her towards God. She didn't want to push me towards God. She just wanted me to be there for her and only for her.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's kind of like you said, kind of like how you discern which is which. It's kind of like, what is it bringing me to? What conclusions, what path is this leading me down?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. Meg, I saw you take, oh yeah. I don't know, Meg, that helped answer my question. And I saw you taking notes. So I know you have something to say.
Yeah. There's some things coming up as you're sharing, Ashley, just like examples in my own life, and I feel like I have been talking abstractly so far, so I think I do want to give examples that are both honoring and honest.
Right.
So I've definitely I've had problems relating well to women. It's been a whole journey. I feel like I've learned some things from the queer elders that I have had, and honestly just also straight people who are really for me. So
Yeah.
straight people out there listening to this podcast, thank you. We need you. We're glad you're here. But there's also things that I've learned the hard way, and that I'm still learning, because I'm still growing. So I'll share a few examples. One, the first time that I ever fell in love with a woman, I didn't know it was happening. I think it was similar to you, Elizabeth, where you were like, yeah, I was taught how to have all these like boundaries with men, but not with women. And so I knew at the time I was out to myself, but there's this woman who just started talking to me, and I was like, wow, this is great. Like, she's really cute and smart and funny and likes talking to me every day, and we're friends. And it wasn't even me trying to like lie to myself about it. I was just like in denial. I'd never been through it before,
right.
so I didn't know how to recognize it. So like before I knew it, I was in this similar place that you were, Ashley, where it was like, oh my gosh, like if I don't get a text message from this person, I'm depressed the whole day. And if I do, like my heart starts racing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm loved. Like, and this proves it. But where's the next text message? When's the next phone call gonna happen? And finally, she ended up sharing that she had feelings for me, and she knew that I was side B. And I was like, actually, she was the one who was like, yeah, I know where you stand. I know this like is not going to happen, and I'm probably self-sabotaging. And I didn't know what to do. I was like, wow, like this is the one thing that I've both dreaded happening in my whole life, but also have wanted my whole life. I was like this nerdy girl like in school, and so like regardless of gender, it was like, oh, like no one's ever gonna like me, no one's gonna ever ask me out, I'm like the nerdy one. So it was genuinely heartbreaking.
Now
and
now in work, I'm like holding all the lesbians back with a baseball bat when we're at like outreaches or beers and queers, and I'm like, all right, who's gonna ask me if Meg's single today? How am I gonna let him down easy today?
Oh man. I don't have anything witty to
You
say.
fried her.
I am visually and audibly blushing right now.
She's
Yeah,
blushing.
nope.
So anyway,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. It's okay. So yeah, it was a new experience for me. It was the most heartbreaking thing I'd ever experienced. I had dated guys. We became friends, and I was like, cool. We don't have to make out anymore. We can just like play video games or go biking. It's great. But this, I was like, okay, I'm definitely gay because this hurts so bad. And God's presence was so much there for me. But like even figuring out where to go from there, it was like, should we still be friends? Like, should we disconnect? And I was like, man, I feel like I would be such a terrible person to burn a bridge here. So we both were like, yeah, let's try to be friends. But like, she really strongly disconnected from me and became cold to me. And honestly, looking back, I think it was for the best. I didn't understand it at the time, but I'm glad we didn't try to stay really, really close because, yeah, I think each one of us was not good for each other at that time.
Right.
I've had another relationship. I've shared this with some people in different side B groups, but there was a married woman that I started getting to know through my church, and I noticed that there was attraction growing toward her, and I was like, oh my gosh, like the stakes are so high here. Like, and granted, I do want to say this, for my married side B friends, it can feel like the stakes are higher that for you than there are for single people. But I just want to declare right now that I think before God, they're not. I think all of us, our integrity is so important. And I think as a single side B person, I feel the responsibility to stand with you in solidarity of saying this matters. And I am not more allowed to not have integrity than other people just because I don't have a family on the line. Families are on the line. My chosen family, my family in Christ is on the line in my integrity, among many other things. So that's a side note, but yeah, I think I did feel the weight of like, I don't want anything to happen here. And I had this sense of fear, this sense of danger that I don't want to get too close. And so inside me, there were these extremes of like, I want to run I should probably run away. I want to run away. I should never talk to her ever again because I want to protect her from me. But there was also this like, could there be any good that comes from us? This, like, we both love Jesus. We both care about these causes. And I basically had this time of prayer where I felt God asking like, Meg, what's the best case scenario here? And I was like, God, like, I want to see us both furthering your chosen family together in the same city. And if that means doing something together, awesome. But if the best is for us to not be connected, great. I ended up basically messaging her and saying like, hey, I really want to go deeper in friendship with you. Can I meet your family? And she was a very emotionally mature person, really well boundaried. And her friendship has become one of the most amazing and healthy friendships that I've had in my life.
Amazing. That's cool.
And something that happened that was really cool this past year was I was sharing with her like, hey, I'm dealing with this crush and I just want to talk to someone about it. And she listened really well and was
another
really
crush.
caring. A separate crush. Okay. I didn't tell her about her. Yeah.
Hope this person doesn't listen to this.
Like, and that's a whole other conversation we can get to it as well. But I during this time that I had caught feelings for her, I was processing with a select few other mature mentors in my life.
Right.
And that ended up being really, really helpful for me. So yeah, this year I ended up processing with her about another crush, which is great. Like I got over
full circle.
Full circle. And she basically asked me like, hey, is there anything that I do that like would be more honoring of you around boundaries? Like, is there anything that you feel like puts you in a compromising situation or makes it harder to relate to me well? And she basically acknowledged the possibility that I might have feelings for her, but in a really honoring way.
Wow. That's cool. I like that.
And it wasn't this like, oh, do you like me? I'm offended if you don't.
Right.
But
not
like,
the weird way.
Yeah, it's not that. But she basically gave me this permission to be like, hey, there was one time where we were hanging out really, really late at night, like alone, and like it felt really intense for me. And I think I would rather in the future just not be in that situation. And she's like, okay, cool. Like, love you, friend. Like, awesome. And
amazing.
I was like, wow. Like, I don't have to be afraid in this relationship because this is a safe person who's committed to protecting me and protecting her family. Now, I've had other relationships where that has not been the case. And people there's been women who have very much proven to me who they are. And that's someone who is very much dedicated to pushing my boundaries. And granted, I think I am responsible at the end of the day for my own boundaries, but I want to see that someone knows where I'm at and has a desire and has proven an ability to respect my values and my boundaries, and really wants to support me in the goals that I have rather than just trying to, get me into whatever kind of a relationship or a situation that they can get what they want from me.
That's really good. Yeah. I just keep hearing over and over again in my head, like, respect and health. Like, those
Mhm.
are really distinctives as it relates to good dependent relationships, because I think you
Mhm.
can't have a relationship with somebody if there's no level of dependency. Like, I think
Right.
a part of a healthy relationship is vulnerability and expressing need and having somebody to bear our burdens along with us. And that's one of the beautiful things about our relationship with God, is that we submit ourselves to God and that we experience what it's like to depend on God. And not that God is ever dependent on us, but I see the ways that God has given us opportunities to, like, work and grow on his behalf. And it's a little different than like a dependency, but it's definitely like a co-laboring, coexisting, co-loving relationship. So
Yeah, it seems
dependency in
like
and of itself isn't bad.
God has chosen. Sorry, there's a little. I'll let you
No,
finish
please.
your
No,
thought, and
I
then
want to hear. I love being interrupted.
Sure, yeah.
So
Okay, cool. It's like a New York culture thing. Like, we don't have time to
you
let
should
people
know
finish.
this
So we
by
just
now.
Oh, okay.
I have learned it as a typically more reserved person. I have learned to intentionally interrupt people. Anyway, yeah, I think, like, when you look at the way that God interacts with people in the scriptures, it is a decided interdependency. God basically says, I could do this alone. Within the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, like, we have love. We have everything that we need, but I, this Trinitarian pronoun that I don't know, we don't want to do this without you. And I think that's something that I've learned a lot too. Like, Ashley, you mentioned kind of bouncing around, like, oh my gosh, I'm way too dependent on this person. Well, let me pendulum swing and just be like, I don't need anybody. Everybody else needs me. And I think, like, my biology teacher's phrase comes to mind, where she was like, anything to an extreme is a bad thing. And I think that's true in biology, but I think that's true also in relationships. Like,
Absolutely.
if we notice we're too dependent on people, maybe we should notice that and explore that a little bit more. But if we feel like we don't need anybody, and we feel like we're the strong one who needs to take care of everyone else, maybe that actually is something worth looking into as well.
And I feel like part of a lot of what we said is, like, healthy boundaries have a lot of communication in them.
Yes.
Because, like, talking about that pendulum swing, I don't think it really started with me being overly dependent. I think it started me being the one who everyone needed in my family, and no one ever took care of me. And then someone came and took care of me. But I ended up getting hurt and hurting them anyway. And so I went back. I was like, well, apparently this is the way I'm supposed to do things. This is the way I've always done things, where I just take care of everyone else around me. So I think it was kind of like, it originally started with me doing that, taking care of everybody around me. Like, I come from, like I said, I come from a large family, the oldest of like 9 kids. My parents had a very rough marriage. Like, they've been married 34 years and have been okay the past 2.
Wow.
Like, rough is really summarizing it. And being in the middle of a lot of that, and just going through a lot as a kid, and then, like, just someone coming in that chose that, like, that was one of the things that I've always loved about friendship. I feel like your friends choose you, kind of like we was talking about a chosen family. This person decided out of nowhere to just love me and take care of me just because, like, we get along. And, like, I was the nerdy loner too. No one thought I was cool. Like, Ed, she found me interesting. I'm boring on most days, I'm being completely honest. But this person found me interesting, and it was just completely new to me. And it was something that I got it was a feeling I got very attached to.
Yeah.
A little overly attached to. And I've had to find that, in God, that God is there to take care of me, that God is there. God finds me interesting. God made me this way in the first place. Like, God has always been there for me. And because I got, like I said, a little too attached to that feeling was, why we ended up, fighting and hurting each other and everything. And we're in a better place now. But it was kind of like you said, that pendulum swing, everything in extremes is when you don't tell people how much you need them and you get mad because they don't know.
Yeah.
And then you get someone needs you too much, and then you end up fighting because you don't tell them that it's too much for you. We have to be able to communicate where we are, and like you said, see if that person respects that. And if they don't, it's kind of like where you come to like this crossroads of like, is this something we work through? Is this not?
Yes.
And being able to recognize all of your own personal context, like being able to admit, like, hey, I come from a family where this is my history, this is my background, this is my tendency.
Yeah.
And that's why I behave this way. And be able to recognize if there is attraction, like you said, talk to other people about it, talk to somebody about it, but if we're, like I said, maybe this isn't the case anymore. Like sometimes I wonder, I'm like, do people still live like this, where that's like they go to a mentor or someone and they're like, they start talking out of left field. I'm like, well, it's not that you like them. And it's like, then what is it?
Yeah, I think that's like sharing that information with someone too is vulnerable. Like when you tell someone, hey, here's my backstory, here's my family of origin.
Yeah.
This is the way relationship was modeled to me, or conflict was modeled or not to me growing up, and I'm trying to choose maturity and grow in that. That's a beautiful thing, but that is a vulnerable thing. And if you have someone who is for you that you're telling that to, they won't use that against you. They're going to use that to say, okay, these are some weaknesses that this person has. Where they're weak, I am going to offer grace and support growth. But if there are people who, for any reason, would want to take advantage of those, that's not a safe place to share with that person. Hey, here's all of my weaknesses. Now go ahead and take advantage of them. And I think that's why it's so important. When you are in love or infatuated with someone, you can be, it's so hard to see whether someone's for you or not, because it feels so great and it feels like they're just unequivocally for you. And that's where opening up to a few other people who are objective is so important, because they can see things that you probably won't be able to.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and I'm just thinking about like my relationship with my husband, and I remember years ago, and it still happens now, I haven't arrived, but years ago, getting into an argument with him, and he would say, okay, I need to like take a step away from this, walk away, and I just was by myself, and I remember thinking, he doesn't understand me. He doesn't get me. I'm all by myself. And when I said that last part, I'm all by myself, was when I was like, oh, you're having an unhealthy perspective of this relationship right now. Like, you have made your relationship with Aaron an idol, because he is the one that's supposed to fully understand you and get you, and the one that needs to comfort you in times of conflict, even with him. And that's the role that God should be playing in my life. So it like immediately brought me to prayer. And I think that that's kind of a matrix in my own life, or a metric in my own life, of like, when I'm in crisis, absolutely, I know who I'm going to call first. Like, I know who's on the speed dial. That's not even a thing anymore. But like, who's on my emergency contact list of like, I'm going to call them right away. But I always have to like stop myself and be like, I need to pray. And I need to call on God first, so that I don't create this enmeshment with friends or family members that replaces what they can offer for me with the great offerings of my creator.
I feel like this might be a good time to talk about the question, Ashley, that you posed to us in preparation for this, which was like, how would you define boundaries? And like, what is your context for that? Could I pivot us into that conversation?
Perfect.
Great.
I feel like I'm learning boundaries because I have a 3-year-old.
Tell us more.
I'm trying to learn boundaries.
Sure, like, I don't want to talk about it.
Hey, your kids are older. They're alive.
It's true, they made it.
Because, like, coming from an abusive family and then trying to, like, I hate buzzwords, but, like, trying to learn how to gentle parent, it's stressful. Like, I don't think I even heard the word boundaries growing up. I didn't know what that was. There was, do this, and nothing good's gonna happen. And I guess technically it's a boundary. But it's like with my son, I'm like, you can keep doing that, but if you keep doing it, I'm going over there. Like, I'm not saying what you have to do in this situation. You can continue to an extent, do whatever you want, because what you're doing is not particularly harmful right now. I don't like it, and I'm going to go over there. Like, when it's time to go to bed, I'm like, I'll lay down with you. We can do that. I'll lay down for you to go to sleep. But if you're going to sit here and push every button on Buzz Lightyear while I lay down with you, I'm leaving. Because you're not going to sleep, and me being with you is not making you go to sleep. So I might as well, we're going to go. And so I'll get up and I'll go and I'll leave. And he says, no, stay. I said, then lay down and go to sleep. And sometimes he does, and I stay. And sometimes he does it, and I leave because I said I was going to leave. Because I also grew up with empty threats, and I didn't like that either. You got threatened for everything, and you didn't get punished for everything that was said, but you got punished in big ways for small things, and for the big things you didn't get punished. It was very confusing, and I don't want to confuse my child either. Like, even when me and my husband were first married, and he'll say this, he was not the most mature person. We got married pretty young. I was 21, he was 23. You're not going to get it right at first. And he would say really dumb things. And I don't know if it's like he asked me if I was going to leave or something like that. I'm like, look, dude, I can tell you this right now. If I ever tell you I'm going to leave, you best damn be sure I won't be here in the morning. Because I'm not going to say that if I'm not actually going to do it. So I'm saying it, so I would highly suggest you not. And he was like, I was just saying, I was like, that kind of stuff you don't just say. We don't just say that. Like, that's not thing that we don't say that. And he was like, right? Because I was like, that type of thing. And like, so like, we just recently, my son, because now he's talking more, there are consequences to his actions. And so like, when he does something, I was like, and my sister, she's like, well, can I tell him that? I said, no, because you'd be lying, because you can't give him those consequences. I can, but you can't. So if you say that you're going to give him those consequences and then you don't, he's not going to believe you. I said, but I can give him those consequences. You can tell Mom will, but not tell him that you are, and then you're not going to. In my family, there were no boundaries. My mom depended on me for a lot. I had a lot of very adult conversations as a child. I had to hear my mom's marriage problems and her trauma growing up and stuff that I was not prepared to hear or to deal with. I was her shoulder to cry on, when my dad went to jail and all these types of things, because she didn't have a strong community around her. And I didn't really start hearing boundaries till like I was in, like I said, in counseling ministry, in ministry myself. When my mom finally, went through counseling a little bit, she started learning what boundaries are. I still think she's got a muddy definition of it. But it's something that I want to say recently, but like probably within the past 10 years is something that I even really knew was about. Like, they always had that book Boundaries, and I read it. My mom did. I didn't do much. But I didn't understand what it was. I thought a boundary was you can't do this to me. But a boundary is really like, if this happens, this is the reaction that I'm going to have.
Yeah.
This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, I
What you
think
guys got?
remembering you have agency is so important too.
Mm.
Like that
Yeah.
that's also where you go over the line of unhealth is when you start to feel like, oh, I don't really have agency anymore. Like whatever this
Yeah.
relationship is and looks like, we've decided together, and or I'm just gonna follow the lead of this other person, and whatever they want from me, I'm just gonna do it and say it and be it. But I think a healthy relationship still gives you agency to walk away, to have an opinion, to shape the context and culture of the relationship.
Right.
Yeah, that's really good. I think it's funny you mentioned the Boundaries book, Ashley. I read that book, and like I said, I've been a nerd my whole life. So when I was in middle school, I got on this kick of just reading like the really big like Christian classic books that were out at that time.
That was big when we were in like middle school, high school. Yeah.
It was, yeah. So I read like Mere Christianity, which like was so huge in solidifying my being like, okay, yeah, I like logically believe in God. But I remember being in middle school, we had a pool across the street from our house, like our neighborhood pool, and I'd go over there and I would like read Boundaries during Adult Swim.
You were a nerd.
And at the time I was like, what the heck? Like, I'm this teenager and I'm reading about all these adults who like, they're just like off their rockers, like off the walls, like they really need help. These stories in this book. And
I think I read
my...
What was it, like there was every man's battle and then every woman's battle?
Yes.
I
think I read
those
like
too.
my mom had it like on a shelf, and I think I like read it like I think it was like within a week, like late at night one time I read it, and this one random chapter on like, you know, there was this one lesbian or something. It was the weirdest book. I don't
There's a
remember most of it. I just
lesbian
remember
in
thinking,
the Every Women's Battle?
I bet she's dangerous.
yes, of course. It wasn't like this was something I can't remember. Like I said,
I
it was
don't remember
so long
that.
ago.
I gotta look
But
it up.
If it was Every Woman's Battle, I'm not even sure if that's what it was, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And it was like one of the last chapters of like, there are some women that do struggle with these things. Type of thing. It was vague and weird, you know. Like I said, I think when you're in denial, you can get yourself into sketchy situations.
Yeah.
So every situation that ex-gay people don't want you to be in, they're prepping you to be in it because you're just like, this is not happening.
It's like, it
In
can
my
be a
opinion.
self-fulfilling prophecy because it is, it's extreme thinking, and you don't have opportunities to have the maturity to talk things through or think things through with a virtue that I don't hear very often, which is temperance. Like, I feel like the word temperance used to be, I feel like I've heard it in like hymns that are not sung very much in churches anymore, but just this like moderation. And
Right.
yeah.
It's
But
an old word.
I was thinking about like, how would I define boundaries? And the definition I came up with was defining and asserting the self in context. So basically like understanding what is me and what is not me. And
like
there are a few categories that I came up with, but like even something that is kind of talked about in this book and things like that is like when we're born, like we are completely dependent on our parents, guardians, whoever's raising us. And as we get older, we start to distinguish between what is me, what is not me. And that's probably why like Ashley having a 3-year-old who is very much asserting themselves in context is where boundaries get difficult in a very poignant way. But like even that is like what is my body? Like we are literally born inside of somebody else's body, and then we are our own person. We also have our own mind and our own will and our own responsibilities. So I think those 4 categories of body, mind, will, and responsibilities are where the more I develop a sense of self, the more I can assert what is my responsibility and what isn't in this relationship? Is this person's anger something that I need to take care of? Or is it something that they actually need to regulate themselves to be present well with me? Is this person's disappointment my responsibility? I mean, if I wronged somebody, if I sinned against somebody,
Right.
that's my responsibility to pursue justice, to try to make that right. But if someone's disappointed in me because of something I can't change, that's not my responsibility. So how do I navigate being who I am, no more and no less, in my relationships, and communicating that well in relationships?
Ooh, I loved it. I think also, like, if I could add, Meg, like, someone's happiness is not dependent on me. My own happiness and joy is not dependent on the other person. Because I think also when we think about boundaries, it's always like the negative thing of like, oh, I don't want to make this person mad at me, or I don't want to like upset them.
Yeah.
But it's also, it can also be the opposite, which is sometimes makes it difficult to distinguish when things are unhealthy. Because as long as everybody's happy, then it can't be unhealthy. But sometimes it's like, well, this person is the only one that can make me happy. Or if I don't make them happy, then this relationship isn't going anywhere. And that's just as toxic.
That's so good.
As keeping people from being mad. So I think, again, like going back to what you were saying, that being myself, no more, no less, and also admitting in that is going to mean not all relationships are going to look the way that you want them to, or have the same level of intensity or intimacy or, connection. Because if I'm going to be me and I'm going to hold the limitations and boundaries and also just characteristics that I hold as a person, that means I'm going to connect really well with so-and-so. But this other person, I'm not going to. And my tendency is, well, but if I know I can connect really well with person A, then I want to connect the same level with person B. So I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that person B really loves me and knows me and understands me and they feel loved and seen. And now I'm not myself anymore. And now I've given up that freedom that also comes with boundaries to just be me. And that, like, I remember I had a friend not that long ago who they're a lovely person, like really lovely, but we don't really talk anymore. And part of the reason why is because they really wanted me to be their like source of joy and completion. And at first I played ball, but then eventually if I didn't answer the phone, she was mad at me. If I didn't text her back right away, she was mad at me. And we would always have these like friendship DTRs over and over and over again. And I was like, dude, I can't do more than what I'm offering you. So if this isn't enough, I'm really sorry, but like, this is all I got. And that wasn't good enough for her. So she was like, well, because of that, I need to not talk to you. And now like maybe like once a year, I'll reach out or she'll reach out, and that's the extent. But I'm mourn the loss of that friendship. But I had to be okay with the fact that my relationship with her is not going to look like the same relationship I have with everyone else. And that doesn't mean I hate her or that like it was some kind of terrible toxic thing that needs to be vilified, as much as like if I'm going to be authentic to myself and honor my own boundaries and limitations, then this relationship just isn't going to fly.
Right. Yeah.
That's good.
Like, I think sometimes, because also I feel like when this happens in every type of relationship, when it's new and you get really excited, sometimes you can set the bar too high for what the expectations are for the relationship accidentally. I remember with a friend of mine, I told him, I'm like, look, I am stoic enough for 10 people. I don't intentionally respond badly, but I do seem standoffish, cold, all of those things, not intentionally, it's just my face. Like, it's just nothing to really do about it. Ask my husband. And they're like, no, it'll be different. I'm like, okay. And, and not that they pushed that limit, but like it got to a point I'm like, I told you. And it's not me being mean, and it's not me not trying. It's just, this is just the way I am. And this is what I have. Not take it or leave it, but like this is all I got. It's to me, it's almost, it's kind of like going to a burger joint and getting really mad they don't have fried chicken. Like, it's just not here. Like, what you want me to do? Like, there's really not much I can do about it. Not that I don't want to, and I would love to make everybody happy. Like, I think I like what Elizabeth said about that, being honest with yourself, like even having that boundary with society as a whole. I used to have this really big thing of like, not everyone has to like me, but everyone needs to know where I'm coming from, and everyone needs to understand why I am the way that I am. And if then they choose not to like me, that's fine. But I never wanted anybody to just assume things about me. So I kind of lived this way to where it was like, no one can assume anything. And you're not true to yourself like that. Like, I lived a very long time wanting people to not assume I was gay. And because I know that for them, that's a negative thing. And I don't want them to think I'm a bad person. You can not like my personality, but I don't want you to think I'm a bad person. And if you think I'm gay, you're going to think I'm a bad person. And I had to let go of that. And that was hard.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think that you think I really don't. I might care depending on who you are. I might not. I don't like going on saying now that I don't care. People think, because I definitely do. But it just kind of depends on who it is. But having to let go of, like, I'm not responsible for everyone's thoughts and opinions and assumptions of me. Like, that's how my grandpa says, that's a you problem.
That's amazing. I think of even the life of Jesus, and like, I was thinking about this a while back, because I was like, I think I've seen a lot of Christians and organizations that are trying to clarify to everybody who they are and what they're about, and dispel all of these myths and accusations. And I'm like, what would Jesus do, right? WWJD. Like,
We're
and
such millennials, you guys.
I know.
How long did y'all wear that
I'm
bracelet?
proud
How
of
long
it.
did y'all wear that bracelet?
We're talking about
For
every
a long
woman's
time.
battle.
Yeah.
We're talking about.
I know, yeah.
I had mine
would
around my
Jesus
ankle
bracelets?
for like years.
Yes.
I used to be ashamed of how millennial I feel, but I'm trying to own it.
Yeah.
No,
Like,
I love
wanna
it.
own being a
You're
millennial.
gonna
I
quote
want to
a
be like,
DC Talk song soon.
that's right. What will people think when they know that I'm a Jesus freak? I don't really care.
There it is. There it is.
Anyway,
That's a great song, though. I'm not gonna lie. It's still a great song.
It's a bop.
It's a bop.
Um, so yeah, Jesus spent a lot of his life like just doing crazy stuff. And occasionally there would be religious people who are like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? You're not honoring the Sabbath. Like, why did you heal somebody? It's the Sabbath. Like, why are you doing this? And Jesus did engage those things, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let me like explain this to you. This isn't what it looks like.
Yeah, no.
It was this, like, here's this Bible verse. Okay, like, do you trust me now? He was like, he explained why he did what he did. He did his due diligence to say, this is what I'm doing, and here's why. You can accept it or not. Goodbye.
Yeah.
And then he would go and keep doing what he was doing, and he wouldn't let everybody else's opinion distract him. And I think that's so powerful. Like, I think there are places for us to be like, hey, you're confused about why I identify the way that I do. Well, let me share where I'm coming from. And let me show you how I live my life. And just let people respond how they'll respond.
I think, like, what episode did we... Well, I can't remember what the last episode was that I recorded, but was it?
Was it the finale?
Maybe?
Yeah,
Probably.
I think it was.
And it was like, what? I can't remember what question they asked. It was like, I've had the same answer for so many questions. I'm like, just listen to us. Just listen to us. Ask a question. Actually listen to the words that come out of our mouth. Because I feel like that's where a lot of things go wrong, where we assume we already know what the other person's thinking. And that's where boundaries go wrong. That's where mentoring relationships go wrong. That's where friendships go wrong. That's where marriages run into problems, where you assume that you know what's in the other person's head, and sometimes you're right, and a lot of times you're not, But like I said, that clear communication is always going to be important.
Yeah.
Like even with God knows what we think, but if you don't say it yourself, be like, God, this is the problem. This is where I'm running into an issue with you, or this is the issue I'm having right now. Sometimes we don't even realize it till we actually say it. Or before we like just voice it to God. Being like, God already knows. Like, yeah, he does, but he wants you to say it. Like there'll be a lot of times, like even in your marriage, I'm like, yeah, I know that this is what's bothering you, but I want you to tell me that. I want you to tell me that's what's bothering you, because that is also your responsibility to tell me. Because technically, until you do, I don't know. I can think it, I can guess it, I can guess really well, but I still might not be right. It's still the responsibility of the person having the feeling or having the whatever to communicate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good.
There are so many. Oh, sorry, Meg.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I don't want to cut you off. I feel like there are so many things that we could like keep talking about, and like other questions that I want to bring up. I do want to be aware that we of our time, and just make sure that we're hitting all the really high notes, which I think we have. So I had another question for our listeners who are thinking like, wow, this is great. I needed this. I have some relationships in mind, or maybe I've been thinking about pursuing like some new friendships or new relationships. What would be one piece of advice that you would offer to somebody who's seeking to start a relationship off with healthy boundaries and expectations?
I have two. I was actually thinking of these before you offered the question. Like, what do we want to leave our readers with? Is there like a challenge or a takeaway?
I knew Meg was going to be ready.
I'm ready with my paragraph. So there's actually two types of audiences that I want to speak to here. One is, I think, the people who maybe feel more like they're chasing after friendships. They're like, man, I'm really trying to make friends, but it feels like no one has time for me, or everyone kind of runs away from me. And then there's also the people who maybe have a harder time asserting themselves, or they find like they find that maybe they're in high demand. Everyone wants something from them, and it's almost like too much for them. So if you out of those two groups, I know they're not like perfect, like not everyone fits into a binary, right? But if you resonate more with that first one, I would challenge you in your friendships to recognize when you feel a sense of emptiness or sadness or negative emotions, and rather than quickly jumping to reaching out to a friend or getting on social media, or kind of going to your medicating behavior of choice, to let yourself sit in that feeling of emptiness, loneliness, disappointment, and let it be a teacher to you. Let it speak to you. Let God enter into that emptiness and fill it in that silence, and for you to ask God, what are you trying to say to me, or what do you want to offer to me here? I know that's really hard, but I would encourage you to try that and notice what happens, and notice if you actually might discover ways that God wants to enter into those emotions with you in a way that was actually more fulfilling than just jumping into, I don't know, a typical habit. For the second group of people, I'm going to give you some advice that a really amazing counselor friend gave to me. And so you're the kind of person who you might have a hard time saying no or setting boundaries. You might feel like people step over you a lot and they don't even notice, and you get mad that they don't pick up on the fact that they're stepping all over you like a doormat. So a challenge I have for you is the next time someone asks you of something, say no. Even if you could do it, even if you are fully capable, you can make it happen, say no and see how that person responds to you and see what that feels like for you and where that's uncomfortable, and invite God into that place and say, okay, God, what do you want to speak to me here about my typical MO, and how do you maybe want to disrupt that? So those are my 2 challenges.
Meg, I feel like you're setting folks up, because I just see, no, I'm just kidding, but I just see somebody's like, all right, I'm going to do it. And then somebody, like a friend, calls them and they're like, hey, so I just won the lottery and I want to split it with you. So will you take the money? And they're like, why did I listen to that last life on Sunday? Now I gotta say no. So here's hoping that doesn't happen.
Well, let's add one other thing. Say no, and then consider giving that opportunity to Elizabeth.
Yeah, exactly. I will. My email is Elizabeth at kaleidoscopeusa.org. I will say yes to the lotto winnings. Ashley, I want you to have the last word. So I'll share my one word of advice. I think what keeps coming up to me, and it might be because of the sermon my pastor gave this morning, but I feel it. It's wisdom. Seek wisdom. Seek the wisdom of God. Seek the wisdom of wise counsel. And literally ask God, like, what is wise for me in this relationship? Like, what is fruitful and wise and life-giving to me and to the other people involved? Because I think the heart is deceptive, and so is the mind sometimes. And, other people can sometimes also be not the greatest resource. And I just think God really, through his Spirit, has enabled us with the fantastic resource of wisdom, which the Bible time and time again tells us to seek. So just seek wisdom. And when you know what's right, do what's right, and it might be saying no, like Meg said. It might be, trusting in something. It might be saying yes, which is something maybe some of you have a hard time doing. But just really seeking God for the wisdom, for the right answers and posture and just disposition in all of our relationships.
I think advice that would have served me well when I was younger, in those situations would have been like, your emotions are not the Holy Spirit. Just because you are a person who generally doesn't feel a lot, just because you feel something right now, doesn't mean the winds of the Spirit. Because I think I got that confused a lot because I didn't feel a lot. Like that was a lot of the things that I fought with. I was a very apathetic person for a long time. And so when someone would come in my life and make me feel something, I thought it was just the Holy Spirit moving. And times it may have been, but I feel that a lot of times it wasn't. Advice that I'm trying to give myself now is not to be afraid of my own shadow in friendships. Not assume that I'm going to mess it all up before I even try, and not try. And I had another one. What was it? I forgot the other one. But I think it was also, like you said, seek the Spirit, but also seek other people in your friendships. Have someone else be able to help you with that, because sometimes if, like I said, in that same sense of like thinking that your feelings can be the Holy Spirit telling you something, you may be like, you know what?
Yeah.
This is a bad idea. I'm out.
Yep.
Just know. And it might be something that God wants you to work through. And then other times where you're like, you know what? I really need to try this. And then you're like, someone else can be like, you absolutely do not. You'll be fine. Just move on. If I'd have had trustworthy people in my life for certain things, we always think that, looking back, things could have been different. But like looking back, it was like, I wish I could have seen that for myself. And if I couldn't, I wish someone could have seen it for me, you know? But
Yeah.
when you don't have people you trust in your life to help you with those things, it's sometimes, like you said, it's just hard to see when you're just in the middle of 7,000 emotions or
Very true.
hormones. Either way.
Very true. Very true. This
For all
was
our-
fun.
All
This
our
is
queer ladies in their
great.
30s, this was apparently for you.
Yeah. Well,
And people listening to other people groups than their
There you go.
own letter.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, and all the youngins who just needed some queer elders in their lives today. Here we are.
So, like, yeah, we
apparently.
messed it up several times, too. I think me and Meg have talked about this before. I think a long time ago, one time I posted in one of our internet groups, I was like, how many of you have this person categorized in your head as your ex that you never dated? And Meg was like, I know exactly what you mean. I was like, cool,
Raise
I'm
my
not
hand.
crazy.
Yikes. That's a question. That's a
Yes.
question.
And that's like one of those intense friendships that should have just not.
Dude, I think that needs to go on our Instagram. We're messaging Josh just to put that out as a poll on our Instagram. How many of you have had an ex that you never even dated before?
That's a
That-
good one.
We
That's
gotta
great.
know.
That's
We
a great
gotta
way
know.
to close.
The young people call that a situationship.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
what the
yeah,
kids
no,
are
people my age
calling
call
it
that-
these days.
BS. But I'm not gonna say that.
This was so lovely. So lovely.
Yeah, this
you
was fun. I
guys.
liked it.
Even
did
though
great.
it was a very serious topic, we all
Yeah.
brought some really great stuff to the table and had fun doing it.
Absolutely.
As always.
I can't wait to see what everybody else's topics are going to be like. This is going to be a good season.
It's a very personal season. So, yeah, I feel like
that's what's going to be.
it's really nice. Well, blessings to all of our listeners, and can't wait to see you on the Instagram polls. Love to know about your exes that you never dated.
That you never had. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.